Every t-shirt on that rack, every phone in that case, every dresser, every coffee maker, every bag of beans sitting on that shelf, all of it crossed an ocean to get here. Not most of it, all of it. You paid one price at the register. That price has a second price folded inside it, one that never shows up as its own line on the receipt, one that could have moved by thousands of dollars while your coffee maker was still sitting on a boat somewhere off the coast of a country you've never been to. You already know shipping costs money. Obviously, a container ship burns fuel. Obviously, a truck needs a driver. Obviously, somebody somewhere gets paid to move a box from a factory floor to your local aisle. That's the version everyone already understands, and it's fine as far as it goes. What's less obvious is that shipping isn't a fixed cost, quietly baked into a price and left alone forever. It's a cost that can swing by 10 times in either direction, for the exact same product, made the exact same way, by the exact same factory, without a single thing about the product itself changing. Here's the actual mechanism. What you pay for something isn't really the cost of making it. It's the cost of making it, plus the cost of moving it across an ocean that has good years and catastrophic years. And that second number is invisible, volatile, and almost never distributed evenly across the products sitting next to each other on the same shelf. Once you understand how that hidden shipping cost actually gets baked into a price, you'll start reading price tags differently. That year, a dresser got strangely expensive while your phone didn't move $1. That's not inflation being erratic. That's an ocean, working exactly the way an ocean works. Start with the simple version, because it's a genuinely elegant piece of engineering. For most of the 20th century, moving cargo meant loading it by hand, crate by crate, sack by sack, into the hold of a ship, then unloading it the same way on the other end. It was slow, it was expensive, and it ate days of dock time per voyage. In 1956, a trucking company owner named Malcolm McLean tried something different. He took a surplus tanker from the Second World War, welded a steel deck onto it, and loaded it with standardized metal boxes instead of loose cargo. He named the ship the Ideal X, and on April 26, 1956, it sailed from Newark to Houston, carrying 58 containers. McLean's own accountants ran the numbers afterward. Loading loose cargo the old way cost roughly $5.86 a ton. Loading the same cargo in containers cost about 16 cents a ton. That's not a modest improvement. That's shipping cost getting ground down, almost overnight, to a fraction of what it used to be. The kind of efficiency spike that turns a once brutal cost into background noise nobody thinks about anymore. Before McLean's boxes, ships spent more time sitting in port being loaded by hand than they spent actually sailing. Dock time was where the real cost lived, not the ocean crossing itself. Containerization attacked exactly that problem, and the standardized box turned out to be one of the most consequential pieces of infrastructure of the last century, on the same order as the shipping container's quieter cousins, the standardized rail gauge, the shipping pallet, the intermodal chassis. None of them are glamorous. All of them are why a t-shirt sewn on the other side of the planet can retail for $8 and still turn a profit. The shipping component of that shirt's price is, under normal conditions, a rounding error. That same standardized box is also why goods can move seamlessly between a ship, a train, and a truck without ever being unpacked in between. The container becomes the unit of transport, not the goods inside it, which is a large part of why global trade volume could expand as fast as it did in the decades that followed. By the time this system matured, moving a physical object from a factory on one continent to a shelf on another had become one of the cheapest steps in the entire chain of getting it to you. Cheaper than the raw materials, often cheaper than the packaging. A cost that used to be a genuine constraint on what could be traded globally got ground down into something closer to background noise. The kind of expense that stops being worth optimizing because it's already been optimized nearly to zero. Stop there for a second, because that's the version most people stop at, and it's the version that makes shipping feel solved, a problem 1956 already fixed. Here's where it breaks. Getting a cost down to almost nothing isn't the same thing as making it stable. A system can be extraordinarily cheap to run and still have zero cushion built in for when something goes wrong, and ocean shipping is exactly that kind of system. There is a fixed number of container ships in the world at any given moment, sailing fixed routes, on fixed schedules, with fixed capacity. New ships take years to design, order, and build, so supply can't respond to a sudden spike in demand the way a factory might add a shift. On top of that, empty containers have to physically travel back to wherever the next round of cargo is waiting. And if that return flow gets disrupted, the usable fleet effectively shrinks, even though no ship sank and no container was destroyed. When demand for capacity is steady, prices stay low and boring, because the system was built to run right at its limit. But when demand spikes hard, or the flow of empty containers breaks down, or ports back up, there's nothing held in reserve to absorb it. Prices don't drift upward gently, they detonate. That's exactly what happened during the pandemic-era supply shock of 2020 and 2021. Before the disruption, a standard 40-foot container cost around $1,420 to book. By September of 2021, that same container was quoted above $10,377 on the global index. more than 7 times its pre-pandemic price, on the exact same box, carrying the exact same kind of cargo, with none of the underlying goods getting any harder to manufacture. Nothing about the factories changed. Nothing about the products changed. The only thing that changed was the price of moving them, and that number is the part almost nobody ever sees broken out. It just gets folded silently into whatever price tag eventually reaches you. Here's where this actually starts costing you money in a way that's easy to miss. That shipping charge isn't billed per t-shirt or per toaster. It's billed per container, as one lump sum, and then split across whatever happens to be packed inside. Which means the size of the tax you pay depends entirely on how much your particular item is worth relative to how much space and weight it takes up. Picture a shipping surcharge of, say, $1,500 added onto a single container. Split across 5,000 phones packed into that box, that surcharge adds maybe 30 cents to each unit, invisible against a $900 price tag. Split across 200 treadmills in the same size container, that same $1,500 adds $7.50 per unit. And on exercise equipment running a few $100s, that's a real felt percentage move. Same disruption, same shipping shock, wildly different consequences depending on what you happen to be buying. This is why, during a shipping crunch, your electronics barely flinch, while your furniture, your appliances, your bulky household goods take the brunt of it. It's not that dressers got harder to build or that phones got easier. It's that a dresser, a treadmill, a washing machine all carry a much larger share of an invisible, volatile cost that has nothing to do with the object itself. The same inventory logic that shows up in any crafting or loot system, where hauling a stack of cheap, heavy materials quietly costs more carrying capacity than a single compact, high-value item, even when neither one looks any different sitting in the same slot. Whether that surcharge shows up as a felt price jump or a rounding error depends entirely on the value-to-bulk ratio of whatever's in your cart, not on anything you did, and not on anything the manufacturer did either. If you've ever wondered why the same disruption seemed to hammer appliance prices for a year while your laptop upgrade barely moved, that ratio is the entire answer. Stop again, because there's a second layer to this that most people never see at all. Not everyone pays that spike the same way. Large retailers, the kind that move hundreds of thousands of containers a year, typically lock in long-term shipping contracts at negotiated rates, months or years in advance. When the spot market detonates, a lot of their volume is already insulated, purchased at yesterday's price under yesterday's terms. Small importers, the kind who might ship a handful of containers a year, usually have no such contract. They're buying on the spot market at whatever the number happens to be that week, with none of the hedge the big players built for themselves. That's not a coincidence of size. It's the direct advantage of scale in a system with fixed biddable capacity. The equivalent of locking in a resource at a stable rate on a long-term basis while everyone else is stuck bidding for it in real time at whatever the live market demands. So the same shipping shock that's a manageable line item for a giant retailer can be a genuine threat to a small one's margins. And the consumer-facing result is uneven, seemingly unrelated price behavior between a big chain and the independent shop down the street selling the exact same category of goods. Two stores, same product, same ocean. Very different exposure to what that ocean just did. Now zoom out to the full map, because there's one more piece that ties the whole system together. Geography itself is a single point of failure. Roughly 30% of global container traffic and about 12% of total world trade passes through one waterway, the Suez Canal. Because there's no practical alternative route between Asia and Europe that doesn't add weeks of sailing time around the southern tip of Africa. In March of 2021, a single container ship called the Ever Given, longer than the Empire State Building is tall, ran aground sideways in a narrow single-lane stretch of that canal during a sandstorm and lost maneuverability. It sat there for 6 days. In that time, an estimated $9.6 billion in trade per day backed up behind it, and more than 400 ships queued waiting to pass. By the time the backlog finally cleared, ports on the other side had to absorb weeks of delayed arrivals landing all at once, which meant congestion, container shortages, and rate pressure that outlasted the 6 days by months. Nothing about global manufacturing capacity changed that week. No factory closed, no raw material ran out, no demand disappeared. One physical bottleneck, blocked for less than a week by wind and a loss of steering, was enough to ripple through shipping rates and delivery timelines for months afterward. That's the part worth sitting with. The entire machine, no matter how efficient its day-to-day operation looks, still runs through a small number of geographic choke points with essentially zero redundancy built in. There is no backup canal. When the primary route breaks, the whole system routes around a bottleneck the width of a single ship, and everyone downstream of it, including you, months later, at a checkout counter, inherits some share of the cost. Put the whole picture together, and the price tag in front of you starts to look like something different than a simple reflection of what a product costs to make. It's the cost of making it, multiplied by the volatility of whatever the ocean happened to be doing that quarter. distributed unevenly depending on how bulky and cheap the thing is relative to its value, occasionally scrambled entirely by a single ship losing steering in a canal on the other side of the world, and quietly cushioned or amplified depending on whether the seller locked in a rate ahead of time or is buying it live. None of that shows up on the receipt. All of it is sitting inside the number you paid, folded in so completely that it reads as just the price, a fixed fact about the object, when it's really a snapshot of a system that never stops moving underneath it. That's the shift worth carrying with you. A price tag isn't a verdict on what something is worth. It's a photograph of a supply chain at one specific moment, taken from thousands of miles away, of an ocean you'll never see and a canal you'll never sail through. And like any snapshot, it can go stale, and it can be wrong, and it can look completely different a season from now for reasons that have nothing to do with the object sitting in front of you. If this kind of breakdown is useful, seeing the actual mechanics behind a price tag instead of just the sticker, that's the whole premise of 8-bit economics. No hype, no predictions about where prices go next, just the underlying code these systems actually run on. If it's useful, subscribing helps. If it changed how you'll look at a price tag next time, a like tells us that landed. And if you've got your own story about a product that got weirdly expensive or weirdly cheap for no obvious reason, the comments are the place for it. There's a decent chance the shipping tax is the explanation. By the time everyone sees it coming, the smart play is already over. The next time a price jumps and nothing about the product seems to justify it, you won't need an explanation from a headline. You'll already know there's an ocean in there somewhere, doing exactly what oceans do.